For most brands, we will be in the top 5 costs on their P&L. So you are missing an opportunity if you're not thinking about us as a partner and you're buying us as a commodity service. If you let us in, we work with 100 other brands, they probably walk the same path as you. So if you let people in, if you use us as an education source, there's a huge opportunity to leverage that relationship rather than it just being a cost that's going out of your P&L every month for how do we deliver product. Because, certainly in the logistics space, what we sell is a considered purchase. It's not something you can try before you buy. You can't see how it feels. You have to take your comfort from brands that we work with, from trust, as you talked about. So it's a big decision, but actually if you work with people, and I'm not just talking about logistics, it could be any partnership, but if you work with people that really believe in you, believe in your values, but can scale, that will save you so much money down the line. Because if you start off on the wrong footing and you get into bed with maybe a logistics company that's a real expert in direct to consumer, but that in your roadmap 3 years down the road you want to be in B2B, and they just don't do that, well, guess what? That's going to be a challenge. So I think asking the right questions up front, having those conversations, being informed will stand you in really good stead for the long run, and ultimately you'll get more out of that relationship.
I think it's first of all understanding what you want to achieve from an additional rollout into brick and mortar. And I think that also needs to be within the forefront of your mind. Let me do this to attract new customers rather than to dilute my business. So again, as we've said before, it's about putting your customer at the very centre of the journey, but a successful partnership with a retailer will only realise itself if there is an investment in making sure that you know the way that your retailer works and the retailer knows the way that you work, and that's an equal balance. It needs to absolutely be a two-way partnership, because without that it won't work at all. Rolling out into brick and mortar stores, you need to be very clear on what your model is, because you've got store design costs, you've got staffing costs, you've got the challenges of training your staff, you've got the even greater challenge of staff turnover and just having to start over and over and over again. You've got your visual merchandising costs. You've got a real question over your brand equity, because nobody will look after your brand in the same way in store that you will look after it. And there's a staffing investment in that as well. So there are different models that you can work with, but ultimately the success will come from navigating your way through your own P&L and understanding the size of the prize and the investment that you need to put into realising that.
Yeah. Like the law of growth and the law of internationalisation in particular is a big one, right? And I think we're not investors, but we are. I usually take this compliment, but we get to see like 100 brands almost like as an incubator. We get to see what succeeds and what, quite frankly, what doesn't. And I think the brands that ultimately succeed have got a really clear vision of where they want to go and a really clear strategy, and they're not going to be distracted along that journey. I spoke to a brand like a couple of months ago, and they were just asking for some advice, and they said, we need a warehouse in the US. I was like, okay, right, let's talk about that, let's unpack it. And actually, what they were really looking to do was just expand into the US without really thinking about, okay, what does this actually mean and what's this going to cost? Because opening another warehouse in the US adds complexity. You've got to start thinking about 2 stock walls. You've potentially got to start putting teams on the ground, pay for their medical insurance. These things add up to lots of money. And actually, there is lower cost ways to enter markets and deliver that growth, and actually, do it on a more kind of try before you buy basis. Whilst Trump's announcement isn't amazing news for anyone, at least people know what it is now, and they can start to make plans for their business. So I think just a couple of practical bits for advice on that front is, I'm not sure it's done yet. Don't have a secret kind of mystic ball in terms of what's coming, but if you look at what Trump's announced in terms of China and de minimis values and things like that, that really could have a material impact on global trade, and particularly on direct-to-consumer businesses. And a lot of our brands are shipping to the US today from the UK and really sweating the assets that they've got, because ultimately, if you go to the US, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, that adds additional complexity, cost, etc. So actually sweating the assets that you've got is often the best approach. But if that de minimis value gets eroded for China and potentially for other countries across the globe, that that will be a material shift. So that's something to look out for. I think the other thing that's often overlooked is when we talk about products is it's actually the country of manufacture, not the country of origin. So whilst brands exist in the UK, a lot of beauty products are made in Europe. So we're all sitting here kind of saying, oh, the UK's got off lightly, you know, we must be in the good books. But for a lot of our brands, they're manufacturing in Italy, Germany, Switzerland. So that's where the rates apply. So just a couple of practical bits of advice to talk about the US.
I think, look, it comes back to all of this, right, which is open and honest conversations with yourself, with your team, with the advisory group. You need to build around yourself to get to like a genuine perspective around what you have the ability to execute on well and how that manifests both now and going forward, right? We all know, Tom can probably attest more than anyone, right, that nothing happens immediately. So if you're going to land an amazing retail contract, if you're going to think about doing that, then ultimately all of the prep work has to come months, if not years before that, right? And I think from our perspective, you know, sometimes I think founders may forget the opportunity in front of them. It's own your market.
Everyone knows obviously what's happened with Charlotte Tilbury and what that brand's gone on to become for us. You know, it's a fantastic story and one that we, as you can imagine, roll out all the time. And they now employ through us, you know, literally hundreds of people across the UK and Europe to manage their distribution. But it didn't start like that. But we are where we are now. And I think there's a real piece here about partnerships and making sure that you're asking the right questions at the outset so that the people that you're working with on that journey can take you on that journey.